Hey guys, welcome back to the Out Jeeping YouTube channel. My name is Austin, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to replace your camshaft in your Jeep 4.0 engine. Now, if you guys saw from my last video, I got the entire front end of this Jeep all torn apart. That's because we're doing a rebuild series since I did hit a deer with this a few weeks ago. And right now, since we have the engine fully exposed up front here, it's a perfect time to go in and start changing out components while it's easy to get to. And one of those is going to be the camshaft. Now I'm going to take you step by step on this whole entire process from tearing down the engine. We're going to have to remove the cylinder head and everything like that and replace components along with the new camshaft that we're going to be putting in here. Now this is going to be the same process if you have a factory cam you're throwing in or if you're doing an upgraded one, which is what I'm doing today with an upgraded comp cam. So let's head over to the bench and we'll see all the components that we're going to be replacing today, and then we'll dive into the Jeep and start taking things apart. Alright, so let's take a look at all the components that we're going to be replacing today. Let's start off with the camshaft. Right here we have a Comp Cams new camshaft for this Jeep 4.0. You do have two different options that you can get for this. Right here we're doing a mild cam, which means that we can use our stock valve train on our head over here and we don't have to worry about special tuning as well. This camshaft works with our factory tune, so we won't have to get our ECU reflashed or anything like that. The part number on this one is 163-201-5. So this is going to be a great aftermarket cam. It's going to add around 10 to 15 horsepower and maybe 15 to 20 pound-feet of torque is what the numbers say online. Nothing significant, but with the low horsepower engine like the Jeep 4.0, it might be noticeable, especially going down the highway, and if you have bigger tires or anything like that. It should help us give us a little bit more low-end torque as well. Now, along with a new camshaft, we're going to be having to replace other components such as our lifters right here. So we got 12 new lifters, and since this is a flat tappet engine, that means the lifters ride directly onto the camshaft. It's metal on metal contact, so that means they're going to have a unique wear pattern with each individual lifter on the cam lobe, and we can't use the old ones because they mated with the existing camshaft. So having a brand new camshaft is going to have to mate with brand new lifters as well. And along with that, I got some new push rods right here. Since once again they have unique wear patterns into the top of the lifter and into the valve train as well, and they're fairly cheap. I think these are only like $2 a piece on Rockauto, so I got 12 of those as well. Now, in doing this job, we're going to have to be taking off the cylinder head to be able to get the old lifters out and everything like that. And along with that, we got some new gaskets that we're going to be replacing. Up here, the main one, we got our head gasket, and then we also have our intake and exhaust gasket right here, since we're going to have to remove those manifolds on the side of the head as well. And moving over here to the left, we have a new box of head bolts right here. Now with head bolts, you can use them up to 2 times is what usually people say, but if you don't know if your cylinder head's been off before or if those are the original bolts, it's always good to just get another set of head bolts as well. They're fairly inexpensive, around 30 bucks or so. Now along with that, underneath here we got our new timing set. So with that timing set, it comes with a new timing chain, chain guide, and new sprockets as well. Since this engine has probably never been apart and has high mileage, odds are that timing chain is going to be really stretched out, and with a new cam you definitely want to have your chain in spec, so that way your engine is going to be running properly. Now under here I have a new harmonic balancer that you don't necessarily need to replace, and since mine has actually failed before and I replaced it with another used one I had in a pinch, I still technically have a used one on there, and it does show signs of cracking and stuff like that, so I went and bought a brand new one that we can throw in there as well. Now we're also going to have to obviously have the timing cover off as well on the engine so we can get that camshaft out, and along with it I got a new timing cover gasket set as well. Now let's talk about other little things. With this cam installation, I did go out and get some new cam assembly lube. This is the Comp Cams brand right here, but this is going to help us coat our new camshaft and lifters when we're installing this, so that way that first startup everything is properly lubed. That way that cam is going to break in nicely and not starve of any oil on those first few rotations. Then also I'm going to add extra ZDDP to that oil that's currently in the engine right now. You don't necessarily have to put brand new engine oil in it while you're doing the cam break-in. Since we're going to be replacing it right away anyway, you just don't want to make sure it's too dirty or too worn out. Mine only has around 1,500 miles on it, so I'm just going to add a little bit more ZDDP, and then after that cam break-in period, I'm going to change the oil, put new oil in, and then add a little bit more ZDDP, and then it should be ready to go. Now, one thing I do want to mention, if you're also installing one of these comp cams, they do have a set of instructions right here. You're going to want to take a look at this because they have a bunch of great tips on what to do, what not to do while you're installing this. There's going to be a lot in here that I won't mention all of them today, but I'll hopefully be able to guide you in the process of installing this cam into the engine right here. But this is definitely something great to look over. That way you won't miss any steps and hopefully prevent any cam failure while you're breaking it in. That's the last thing you want to do. So we want to do everything properly and basically textbook status on all the stuff so that we have no issues. So now that we went over all the components that we're going to be putting into the Jeep engine right here, let's head over to the Jeep itself, and then we'll take a look at all the components that we need to basically remove off the engine to be able to get at this camshaft and replace it. So let's head over. Alright, so taking a look at the engine bay right here, we're pretty much where we left off in the last video. I did a couple things like replacing the water pump right here, and then I also removed our power steering pump to go ahead and replace that power steering pulley that was basically all cracked up and everything. But other than that, we're pretty much right where we were before. I did put a new water pump on here, which I don't think will be in the way, but time will tell. Once we start tearing this down, if I have to remove it, no big deal. But if you didn't watch the video right before this, I highly recommend that, since we had the entire front end ripped apart, so that way we can be able to access this camshaft up here. But if you're starting from scratch, you're pretty much going to have to remove all your coolers and stuff up front here, because that camshaft is coming out of the front of the engine right where my hand is, and it's going to have some room to be able to go into. So by having everything off the front here, it's going to make everything a lot easier. Now, looking at this a little bit further on other components that need to get removed as well. Now, obviously we need to get that cylinder head off to be able to remove our lifters, which are riding on top of the camshaft. So to do that, we got other components plugged into our cylinder head. So we got our entire intake manifold, we got our exhaust manifold that's underneath it, and then we got a bunch of other little sensors and everything like that we're going to unplug from our intake manifold. Our air box, we're going to have to remove that. We got our spark plug wires, and then we got this bracket going into the cylinder head that's holding our AC compressor as well down here. So we're just going to get started on this. I'm going to start by removing some small hoses, our throttle cables, all the breather hoses and everything like that. Then we're going to have to remove our fuel line, basically just everything that's on this intake manifold. And we're going to remove it kind of all in one piece. We'll leave all the injectors and things like that still on there, but just kind of taking off sections at a time. So with that, I'm going to get started and start removing some components. We've got our breather right here that goes to our air box. We can pop that off, swing this out of the way. We're going to remove our valve cover. So we want everything that's obstructing or snapped into it off of there basically. Now, as you're taking components off, it's always good to have a table that's cleared out, all set up, so you can just simply place things onto a workbench. So that way everything's laid out nicely, you know where everything is. You can keep hardware together in separate piles or separate baggies and label them, so that way you know where everything goes when you reassemble things. To make things a little bit easier, I'm going to pop all the cables out of this bracket right here, because we got them going all over the engine bay, and then just kind of help get this out of the way, because I know it'll become a pain once we're trying to take the cylinder head off. It's always good to just take some photos of how vacuum hoses and wiring is all routed in here, so that way we get it exactly where it was when we put this all back together. So this entire wiring harness is going to have to be removed from our intake manifold, so I'm just popping everything off, and then we're going to throw it to the side. So all these injector wiring plugs need to get unplugged. Alright, so now that we got all of the little things all disconnected from our intake manifold, we're going to start unbolting it from the cylinder head. And they're held in basically by a bunch of 9/16 bolts. We got 5 of them up here, and then we got 4 underneath, which are kind of a pain in the butt. But since we do have this open room under here, it should be a lot easier to work on than having all of the radiators and everything like that up here as well. So I'm going to start breaking these free and remove the intake first, and then the exhaust manifold will follow after. Alright, with those top ones removed, I'm going to go to the bottom. This is my setup. I just have a 9/16 socket on a swivel with some extensions, and it's a little bit difficult. You got to feel around. They're going to be basically in between the top bolts, but just underneath. So I got the 2 back ones done. Those were the most difficult. To get the back one lined up, since I couldn't fit my hand back there, I went underneath and I was able to spot that bolt. Fished my arm up there, got this on, then came back up on top and got that off with a ratchet. So we just got these 2 front ones underneath left to do here. And these bolts are actually coming out fairly nicely, since a few years ago I did have this off because I replaced the exhaust manifolds. There we go. This is the last bolt, so this intake's going to start coming off, so I'm just going to hold that there while I get this bolt out. Alright, then I can remove this from the vehicle. I got my fuel rail taped up so it can't drip out, but if you don't, just be mindful there's still fuel in here, so that could leak out as you're taking it out. Alright, then I'm just going to finish taking out the center bolt, and then we got 2 nuts on either end of the exhaust manifold that only hold on the exhaust manifold. We'll remove those next, and we'll move the exhaust manifold to the side. We don't have to disconnect it from the front pipe since we're not completely removing it from the vehicle. We just need it detached from the head. There we go. And that's all we needed, just to be a little bit of ways like that. We can peel off our old gasket right here. Okay, so with our intake and exhaust off, now it's time to tackle the head. We gotta take the valve cover off first. We got a bunch of 10mm bolts going all the way around. Some of them are studs, some of them are not. So I just took some pictures so I know which one goes where when I put this back. Otherwise, you can take a piece of cardboard, and as you take out each bolt, you can lay them out in the pattern that it's in, so that way you put it back together the exact same way how it was. So, but I just took some pictures, so we're gonna zip these out quick. And I did replace this valve cover gasket before, but if you have the original gasket on here, that's probably going to be another part you're going to want to add to your list. But I have a FEL-PRO here, so I should be able to reuse it. These guys are actually 7/16 10 mil. And these last ones, you might need to get creative with a swivel to get them out because they're a little bit tight against the firewall. Alright, now we should just be able to lift this out of here. Just wipe this back over. There we go. And I take that back, I probably will just replace this gasket. It's cheap enough, but I installed the grommets improperly last time, and they're kind of all chewed up. So when you put this back together, which I'll show you later, they got some aluminum spacers that go in between the grommets. I, for some reason, did put that back in, so they all got kind of like over-torqued and tore up, so we'll have to put those back in with our new grommets and gasket right here. Alright, so before we start unbolting the head, there's a couple other things we have to remove. We have to remove our spark plug wires going into our spark plugs. And to make it easy, I'm just going to label them by using zip ties. 1 zip ties for cylinder 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and do it all down the line. Another thing is we got to remove our push rods. So we got to take our rocker arm assembly off on this and then pull out our push rods. Now our rocker arms, we want to make sure that they're on the exact same cylinder when we put it back, so you want to lay it out in the orientation that you take it off, so that way you can put it on correctly. Since I'm a little bit limited on space, I decided I'm just going to unbolt this, pull out the push rods, and then bolt this back onto the cylinder head. So these are a 1/2 inch right here. So we'll pull this up. So since we got new push rods, doesn't matter about these, we can just throw these away. So I'm going to put that back in there and just thread it in. Doesn't have to be tight right now. This just needs to hang on in its correct location. So we'll just tighten this up a little bit. And I'm going to do that to all of them. Alright, so I got our zip ties on our spark plug. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I ran out of white ones. So I put one black one for 5, and then it's empty on 6. So we're going to pull these out of here and then rest them to the side. We are going to have to remove our distributor, so but we'll get to that once we get the head off and everything like that. It'll give us a little bit more room. But right now we're just pulling these guys out. Alright, so for taking off the head bolts that hold on the rest of the cylinder head, we want to kind of remove it in a specific pattern, kind of the opposite of how you would torque it down. So start from the outsides and kind of work our way in. This just kind of helps so that way we're not putting a weird strain on any specific head bolts, and also so we don't warp the head as well. But one last thing we got to do is we got a nut that's on top of the back right cylinder bolt, and that's just holding on of what used to be our ground strap, which is actually broken. The other half goes to the firewall, so that's 11/16. I'm going to remove that quick, and then we can continue to remove our head bolts. Pull off that strap. Alright, now we'll start pulling off these head bolts. They're going to be a 1/2 inch 12 points, so I have to use a special socket on that guy. Back here we'll have to use a breaker bar on these, since it's a little bit hard to get our impact on. Now this last bolt right here, this one's going to have to come off when the cylinder head is removed, since we won't be able to remove it because of the firewall, as you can see. So we might just need to prop it up with a piece of hose or something, so that way it doesn't get caught as we're trying to remove our cylinder head. And there's one last thing we got to do. I forgot, we got 2 bolts going into the cylinder head from our AC pump, so we're just going to break those free, 9/16. Alright, now comes the fun part. I'm going to lift the cylinder head out of here, so break the seal. Just going to put a zip tie around that bolt so I don't have to hold it up the whole time. Ooh. There we go. It's caught in that wiring harness. Now I'm just going to set this over on the workbench. Ooh. We got our old head gasket. Remove that. Alright, so now that we got the cylinder head off, we have to remove our distributor. The reason why we got to do that is because our distributor is driven by our camshaft, so their gears mesh to each other, so that has to come out for us to be able to slide out the old camshaft and put in the new one. But before we do that, we do want to make sure that we're at top dead center, and this is going to help us get our timing correct, especially when we put our distributor back into place. So setting top dead center should be pretty easy, since we can see the cylinder right here. It's basically our number 1 cylinder. We want that push all the way up, and we want to make sure that inside our distributor, we're going to pop off the cap, and we're going to make sure that rotor is pointing towards the number 1 spark plug wire, and that way we know that we're at top dead center. If it's opposite, that means we're 180 degrees off. We have to rotate the engine another rotation to be able to have that line up. So we're going to pull off this cap right here. But first I'm going to locate our #1 spark plug wire. And that's this guy right here. So if you're looking at from the passenger side of the engine, it's going to be kind of towards the 5 o'clock position. So I'm going to pop this cap off quick. So I'm going to gently pop this out of place. And looking at our rotor, it looks like it's off a little bit. So we're going to crank the engine. I got 3/4 inch socket on our harmonic balancer. So we can turn it clockwise like this, and as you can see, our rotor should be pointing down here. Right now it's pointed at the 12 o'clock. If you're looking from this side, it should be pointing towards the 5. So we're just going to keep rotating it. So that's at the 5 o'clock position, and our cylinder, it's on its way up. And then right where it's pretty much flush with the top of the short block here, it'll start to go down, but right there, right where it stops, that's our top dead center. We got #1 pointing at the 5 o'clock position, where it would be pointing towards the #1 spark plug wire on that distributor cap. So we are at top dead center. We're going to keep this rotation. We're going to memorize it because that's how everything's going to go back together. So the next thing we're going to do is move our distributor. It looks like we got kind of a fork plate holding it down in there. It looks like a 1/2 inch or 13mm nut or bolt holding that in. We also got our electrical connector right here. This is our cam position sensor, so we just got to undo that as well. So we got our bolt, and then we got our fork piece that holds down our distributor. And we should be able to slide that out. There we go. You can see right here on our distributor, this flat end right here, this is what actually engages our oil pump. Then right here where we have these gears right here, that's what actually engages with our camshaft and what drives our distributor. So to finish up the disassembly on the top end of the engine, we're going to go ahead and pull out our lifters right now. So I just got a magnet right here. We're going to feed them down into where our push rods were, and right on the bottom there, that's where our lifters are. So we're going to pull these up. Sometimes if you don't have a good enough magnet, it can be a little bit tricky. Let's see if I can get a pick in there as well. Ooh, that guy was stuck in there. Sometimes it can be a little bit stubborn, but I was able to wedge it up a little bit with the magnet and then just get a pliers on it. But just taking a quick look at this, it doesn't look terrible on it, which is good. There's a slight domage inward on it, but other than that, it's not terrible on this. So we'll inspect all of them just because I'm curious. But yeah, we'll pull them all out. And also, it seems like they're stuck on there because we got a layer of just like carbon buildup on the bottom, so it's trying to push through that bore in the cylinder block, and so it's catching on this kind of like a dirt ridge. So we just got to fight through that. There's another. Alright, so I got 3 lifters out, and the next couple I was trying down the line, they are just so stuck in there. They get to a point where they just stop because they're getting caught on all that debris and everything like that. So I'm actually just going to hit it with some Kroil on the rest of these, so that way that Kroil has time to work and kind of hopefully dissolve a little bit of that carbon buildup that's on the end of those lifters that's preventing it from getting in the hole. So we'll just squirt this around in there. Alright, so while we're waiting for those old lifters to soak, now's a good time to actually point out we want to take our new lifters and actually pre-soak them in some new oil, so that way they all fill up inside and have oil all around them. So I'm basically just going to put it in this container here and fill it up with oil and have it sit overnight. So I'm going to plop them all in. Alright, then I got some fresh 10W Rotella. We'll go and fill this up. There we go. And we'll just let that sit. Some bunch of air bubbles and stuff are coming out. Kind of shake it a little bit to make sure all the air bubbles out, but we'll just let that sit overnight, and then they'll be ready to install for the new camshaft. Alright, so I actually managed to get all the lifters out, and basically just a little technique I did was I got on here with a needle nose pliers and just kind of slowly worked my way, kind of going back and forth and lifting it up, then eventually got it through that ridge. You can see that ridge is pretty strong on some of these to be able to get off, and then it kind of broke away a little bit on one side to be able to get through that hole. So I got those off of there. Using that Croil definitely helped to kind of soak them down a little bit and to free them up. One thing that's kind of surprising, well, not too surprising, I knew I had some bad lifters in here since this engine ticked pretty loud. Wasn't anything lower end, but I knew it was valve train or lifter tick. And what I noticed on all of these lifters is they're all collapsed. And the way you can tell is you can take a push rod and push down. You should have it spring back at you, but all these are completely shot. Now, for instance, we got a new one right here. So we'll push down on this and you can see it. That's pretty much spring loaded right there, and we got that seat that's all the way up to that little wire in there, which is our little keeper. And on all the old ones, that cap is all the way down. There's a big gap between that keeper, so all these are collapsed. So this is something we definitely had to do either way, if we're doing a cam or not, because these lifters are shot and they've probably been shot for a long time. But however, I am still surprised that the surface right here where I was riding on the camshaft actually doesn't look terrible at all. There's no significant wear or anything like that on here. Alright, so we got everything off of the top of the engine that we need to get so far. So now we're going to work on the front over here. We need to get this timing cover off to be able to get our timing chains out, and then we can eventually get our camshaft out as well. First things first, we still have the engine at top dead center. I was moving it around a little bit, but memorizing the position it was before. I did rotate the engine a little bit. It helped kind of pop up those lifters a little bit so I can get a grip on it with needle nose pliers, but I got it back to where it was before. We're top dead center. So now we can go ahead and remove our harmonic balancer. This is a 3/4 inch bolt right here, so I'm going to get my impact on that. Then we can get our harmonic balancer puller and pop that off. Alright, so I got my harmonic balancer puller on my harmonic balancer right here. What threads into here is 5/16 by 18 bolts, and I just got a big universal kit, so there's a bunch of bolts and stuff that fit in there. And got our puller up onto the crankshaft right here with a tapered end so it won't damage it, and then on the end here it's a 3/4 inch drive. Now unfortunately this access hole that's in this front lower core support is just a little bit too low to fit an impact to get a direct drive on this, so I'm going to have to weave a wrench in here to do so. And when you do it manually like this and not use an impact, the engine will rotate on you. So I should have probably done this first before I ripped apart the rest of the engine, because what you can do with the cylinder head on is you can put a piece of rope in one of the spark plug holes, and it will prevent the piston from coming up all the way and kind of cushion it and lock up the engine that way so this won't rotate. I'm going to try it and see maybe if I can fit a pry bar in here just to kind of prevent this from rotating. It's not ideal, but it's the only thing I can do right now. So this has been off before, so I'm hoping it's not going to be too much of a pain in the butt. So I'm going to start rotating this and see what happens. And I can already see that starting to come loose. It's already pulling that thing out, and it's not taking a whole lot of effort, so I'm not really damaging the puller by using that just to hold it in place. It's not a whole lot of force, maybe 20 to 30 foot-pounds or so. So I'm going to keep working at this, and we'll pop this off. All right. There we go. Just gotta weed this out of here. That's our harmonic balancer. Alright, so with that harmonic balancer off, there is another thing we're going to have to remove to be able to get at that timing cover. This alternator bracket kind of covers it a little bit, so we're going to have to remove this alternator with the bracket. So looks like we got some 9/16 head nuts right here and some 15mm bolts over here. Just a mix of SAE and metric. That's what they did on these Jeeps, so we're going to go and zip those guys off. I already went ahead and disconnected the electrical in the back of this. They just got that main power wire, and then they also have that connector as well. Slide off that bracket. And actually, this alternator does not need to get completely removed. I'm just going to throw this bolt back in on top just to kind of hold it in place, since it was mostly that bracket that was covering it. And we'll just leave that right there. And now we have access to all the bolts on our timing cover. Alright, so now we can start unbolting the timing cover. We got a wide range of assortments of hardware that's used to bolt this in place. We got studs that were used for the alternator bracket. We got some small 7/16 bolts. We got some bigger 9/16 bolts and everything like that. But basically just around the perimeter of the timing cover, we're going to start pulling stuff off. Now is a good time to also take a picture so you know where all the hardware is. And it might not look like it from the view you have, but the timing cover does clear the water pump, so we should be able to slide that out as well. I noticed on mine, which is kind of interesting, I got 2 empty bolt holes where some bolts are supposed to go through. One's right here underneath where the water pump is, and then another one is even lower, but the bolt is just sitting in that little crevice area and looks like it's been there for a long time. So I'm curious if maybe someone, when they undid the water pump or replaced it 100,000 miles ago, they accidentally pulled this out and never put it back in. So that's kind of interesting how that is. We'll have to get another one for that. So I'm just going to start zipping these out. And we also got some bolts going up from the oil pan that actually thread into the bottom of the timing cover. I believe there's 4 to 6 of them that are on the bottom side here. Those should be 7/16 and a half inch. Alright, so I got all the bolts out except for this guy right here that's kind of like tied into the bracket in the back, and I can't pull it out all the way without it hitting this pulley right here. So I think I can remove the timing cover with the bolt, so I'm just going to gently pry it away from the engine, break that seal, and we'll try to wiggle it out of here. So what I'm doing right here is I'm kind of breaking away from the oil pan gasket and lifting it up a little bit and trying to slide the bottom out first, so that way we can get around this top end over here. Now I can remove that bolt. And there we go. Alright, so now comes all the fun part when replacing this camshaft. We got our timing chain right here, and as you can tell, this engine is very dirty on the inside, even though it's been changed every 3,000 miles, but it just has a bunch of miles on it, so there's going to be a lot of cleaning I'm going to have to do on my end. So we're going to start off, we're going to remove this old timing chain set, take some pictures so you remember how to put this back together. First we got this oil slinger that's on the crankshaft. We're just going to pull that off. Next we got a 5/8 bolt going into our camshaft. We're going to pop that off, pop off the sprockets and chains all together, and then we're going to pop our sprocket back onto the camshaft. We're going to use that as a handle to pull out our camshaft. Before we put that sprocket back on, it looks like we got some sort of camshaft locking plate, so it prevents that camshaft from walking. Looks like there are 2 T40 bolts holding this on, so we're going to zip those off. Now we should be able to just pull this out. As you can see, our camshaft just fell out. So, and I'm actually not going to put the sprocket on because it's going to hit this front cross member. So we're going to pull this out, but installing the new one, we're probably going to put that sprocket on to just kind of help guide it into its place. So I want to be very careful on pulling this out. We don't want to scratch any of the camshaft bearings at all. And kind of lift the end up if you can, pulling this out. There we go. Alright, so before we flip things around and start installing things, Now is a good time to clean everything up, and that's what I'm going to do here. This engine is very dirty. The timing cover, even on the outside, has probably a 1/4 inch of sludge on the outside. So I'm going to scrub everything, get everything cleaned, get all the gasket surfaces clean on this timing cover and even on this head gasket up here, because I don't want to install the new camshaft with lifters and then do the head gasket surface, because I don't want any dirt falling down on our new parts. So I want to keep this as clean as possible, and we're going to try and not have any debris get into our oil pan here. If it does, it's not the end of the world. I'm planning on changing this after the cam break-in, so it'll help kind of flush all that dirt out and sink to the bottom of the pan. And then we can change it all out. And one thing to note on this timing cover, since it does seal with the oil pan, we got this oil pan gasket right here, so we're going to have to cut this off and take a look at your new gasket set. We got a new piece that's going to go into here. There's going to be some RTV we're going to have to do to fill in the corners and everything like that. And then we also got a new gasket that's going to go onto this top surface as well. So I'm going to go clean everything up, and then we'll be back to install our new camshaft. All right, it is time to take a look at our new camshaft. This is it right here, right out of the box. And just following the instructions that Comp Cam gives you, the first thing we're going to do is take some mineral spirits to it and clean off any soot, any shipping oil residue and everything like that. Then after we get it nice and clean, we're going to put some assembly lube on there, which is this stuff right here. And then we're going to basically coat everything nice and liberally. And then we're pretty much ready to install this into the engine. So I just got some mineral spirits and a microfiber towel, and then I'm just going to go and wipe everything down. Alright, got our camshaft all cleaned up. I got our timing set all out here as well. This is our new timing set with 2 new sprockets, and we have a new chain and then also a chain guide that goes into that timing cover. So I got that in standby, ready to go, because we're going to install that right after we get the camshaft in. A couple other things to note, when you do inspect your camshaft for the first time, you want to make sure that the numbers that are etched into the camshaft match what's on the box. That way you know for sure that you have the correct camshaft that you're installing into your vehicle. So now I'm going to take some cam lube, and we're just going to go and cover everything. This stuff is supposed to be very sticky, so that's the point of it. It's supposed to latch on and not just drip off right away. And some of you are probably asking if I'm replacing the cam bearings that are inside the engine block, and the answer for that is no. You can take a quick inspection on your old camshaft and you'll see if there's anything major going on there. I mean, if you have major scoring or something, that might be something you want to look into. However, most cases you're going to be fine just using the original bearings that are in there, and that's what I'm doing on my Jeep. Even though it has a lot of miles, they still look good. Alright, so that camshaft is all ready to get installed. Over on the engine side, I got the timing cover gasket surface on the engine block all cleaned up. So we're going to put this in the motor, and once we get around halfway or maybe 3/4, it's going to be kind of hard to be able to lift it up so that these bearing surfaces fit into the bearings, because it has 4 sections to go through. So that's where we're going to stick this on, and this is going to be a handle to kind of help hold it as we get it in there. I know the front cross member is a little bit in the way, so we're going to see how this is going to work for putting it in there. Make sure you're going the right way, obviously. We're going to be very gentle, and if anything gets stuck, we're not going to force it. We're just going to take our time with this. Alright, so I'm going to stop right there, and then I'm going to grab our sprocket, and we're going to use this to kind of lift the last bit up into place. There we go. Then we can just pop off that sprocket for now. Push that all the way in. There we go, our new cam is in. Now it should be all downhill from here on getting everything else reinstalled. Alright, so next we can reinstall our camshaft thrush plate, which is this guy right here. I went and just cleaned it up and then also I'm just putting assembly lube on all the parts going back into this. So I'm going to fit this guy on here. And then we got our 2 Torx bolts, and we're going to torque these guys down to, I think it calls for 18 foot-pounds. Alright, so for timing, I got the new timing set on there, and the way that I'm kind of figuring this out, just to kind of keep where the engine rotation was before, I'm doing some things a little bit different my way. But where this was set before is this set at top dead center, the sprocket for the crankshaft. We had the keyway facing 12 o'clock, and when we pulled off the old camshaft, they had the keyway kind of facing towards 8 o'clock position. But to set timing, we have to make sure that these timing marks are set up. So I went ahead and did 1 full rotation on the crankshaft, and that brought the timing mark right here. And then I adjusted and clocked our camshaft to where our timing mark is going to meet up right here. So every 2 rotations of the crankshaft, these timing marks should line up perfectly. So I got it set right now. Your timing marks on each of the sprockets should be in line right here, and it should be on an imaginary axis from the center of the camshaft to the center of the crankshaft. So those are all lined up right there. I'm going to go ahead and finish bolting this on, and then actually go back 1 rotation to where the engine was top dead center before, so that way I can get the distributor exactly where it was before, so I'm not 180 out or anything like that. But the way I kind of did it is I got this sprocket for the crankshaft on halfway, so that way I can easily pull this off and then just rotate the crank and then kind of fit this back on. It might take a few times to get it right, but I got it right right now, so we're going to finish installing this. You're going to want to push in on both sprockets kind of at the same time. For some reason, the new sprocket that's on my crankshaft is a lot tighter. I took out the key to make sure it wasn't anything weird, but I think it's just kind of a tight fit. It goes on if I gently tap it. I'll take like a piece of wood or something like that, keep working it from side to side, and then it'll go in. Alright, so once we got the timing chain all set back on there, we're going to take our camshaft bolt and thread that back into place. Now there really isn't any good way to torque this down since it's going to rotate the engine, so I'm just going to give it a little bit with the impact. Careful not to snap this or anything. Now next I'm going to take a little bit more assembly lube and just kind of run it all around the chain here. So that way this doesn't start up dry at all. Then I'm going to rotate the engine to where it was before, so that way I can get my distributor set in there correctly to how I took it out. And as this rotates, there's a dry spot on the chain. You can just take a little bit more assembly lube and lubricate that out. Alright, so I got this in the location that I want, and I'm just going to pop off this crank bolt. Then I got my oil slinger all cleaned up, and I'm just going to put a little bit of assembly lube on that as well and stick that back on there. Alright, now we're all ready to put on our timing cover. I'm going to go over and clean off the timing cover gasket surface, and also we're going to replace that front main seal in there as well. Alright, so here we are with our timing cover. This thing cleaned up pretty good to where it was before. There was a solid 1/4 inch of sludge on here that I scrubbed up with some simple green and a plastic brush on a drill. Scrubbed it for a solid 20 minutes, so I got as much as I can, and it should be a lot better than it was before. There's a lot of sludge that was on the inside too, and I got most of it out, but the rest of it just gonna have to stay there. That's pretty baked on there. But taking a look on the inside here, you can see some scratches that was right in this area. Looks like our old timing chain, since it had all that slack in it, was just rubbing on here, so good thing we're replacing that. Right now we need to punch out our old front main seal that's right here. So if you look on the back side, they got this little notch right there, so we can fit a punch inside there and just pop that guy out. Alright, so I got that old seal popped out and went and cleaned up the inside surface. I'm just going to lube it up again, a little bit of assembly lube to help that new seal pop into place. Our new seal, we're going to have the springed side facing inward inside the engine. So we're going to set it like so. I got my seal driver right here, and we're going to tap this into place. Make sure we're going in straight. Once that bottoms out, it's nice and flush, we are all installed. Alright, so I got everything wiped down with some brake clean, both on this gasket surface as well as the engine. Last thing we got to install in our timing cover, this is our chain guide, so that sits in this groove right here. And then I got our gaskets kind of laid out. This is a two-piece gasket, so we got one end that goes on the majority of it, one that goes on this top surface right here, which is pretty much the bottom. What I'm going to do is RTV both sides because this is kind of a weird lineup, and especially in those corners where it meets between the oil pan block and this. I had to trim back on the oil pan gasket, and that aftermarket oil pan gasket, since I did it recently over the summer, it is an aftermarket FEL-PRO one, and it's steel lined, so I had to cut it, and there's a little bit of a metal edge in there, so we're going to have to make sure to put some RTV in that corner. I'll show you guys when we get to the Jeep, so that way we have no leaks. But I'm going to coat the side that goes on the engine block first and stick our gasket on there. Then we'll coat the timing cover side and then stick this on there. So I got some black RTV that's meant to resist oil, so we're just going to lightly put a nice film on this gasket surface. And lastly, we can put a nice film of RTV on the timing cover gasket surface. Alright, so we got our gaskets all stuck onto here, and this bottom gasket, I can tell it's going to be a pain in the butt since it wants to keep popping up. I did put zip ties through the holes and through the outside of the case. It's a little trick I did when I did the oil pan, and then once I have this in here, I can cut them and pull them out. That way I know it's not just going to get pushed in once I put this timing cover in. One last thing I'm going to do before I put this in, I'm going to put a thick bead of RTV down in these corners because I have a feeling that's where it's possibly going to leak if it does. So I'm going to have to weave that bolt in and kind of put this in on that weird angle, then also make sure that these guys don't get pushed in as well. Alright, so I got that set in there. It's a little bit stressful. Now I'm just starting to thread in some bolts, and then I'll cut the zip ties on the bottom. What kind of helps to make sure that the gasket is not peeking out one way or going in the other, you can take a pick, and if it looks like it's pushing in, you can kind of weave a pick in and kind of pull that gasket back where it mates with the oil pan gasket. Either way, I'm going to take another bead of silicone and just on the outside here kind of lay a little bit of a bead, kind of like a caulk line, just to make sure that we have no leaks there. But right now I'm just going to thread in all of our bolts, and then we'll just snug everything up in a crisscross pattern. Alright, that was a pain in the butt, probably the hardest part of the job, honestly, just trying to get everything lined up, especially with that gasket, but got everything all snugged up. Now I'm going to throw on our new harmonic balancer. I'm going to put a little bit of lube on the new sealing surface, so that way it doesn't go in dry. And then same thing on the inside, so it slides onto that crankshaft pretty easily. Now, for some reason, I don't have harmonic balancer install tool with my kit, so I'm just going to have to use the bolt to be very careful not to strip any threads or anything like that. So we're going to fit this up on here, line up our keyway. Alright, so in my harmonic balancer kit, I for some reason didn't have a installer part with it, so I kind of made my own. I got some bolts right here. I got these from work. These are just 1/2 inch by 20 thread right here. Got them in a few different sizes, and basically making my own installer tools. So I got a bolt long enough that has plenty of engagement into the crankshaft, and then I also have a nut here on the end, and ideally you'd like to put a bearing or something right here. That's what the installer tool is, but I just got some washers right there with a little bit of grease in between them to kind of help so there's no friction. And then now we're just going to hold the end of this bolt over here, and then we're just going to tighten this nut up, and then you'll start to see this suck onto that crankshaft. So I'm going to go all the way with this until it bottoms out. Then we'll pull off this installer tool and then replace it with our bolt. Alright, so that bottomed out. We're just pulling off the makeshift puller right here. Then we'll take our original bolt-in washer and thread this back in. I'm just going to use an impact right now to tighten this up, but to torque it down we'll have to do it later when we can stop the rotation of the engine, because right now if we try torquing it, it's just going to keep rotating. I would also like to mention now is a great time to replace your motor mounts now that everything is off of here, and it was actually really simple. I went ahead and already replaced them on both sides. I just had some extra motor mounts I had in storage for many years, and I finally just put them to use here. They're nothing special, probably just cheap ones from Rockauto. They're not bad at all for only like $6 or so, but I'm glad I did, because this one over here on the driver's side that has a big crack in there, I didn't really see it from the top because of this bracket that was in the way, but once I got it out, that clearly shows that that guy is shot. The other side wasn't too bad. A little crack here starting to form, but I got both sides replaced. Just jacked up the motor of the Jeep with a piece of plywood on top of a jack and just jacked it up by the oil pan. Being careful not to go too far or anything like that so you're not damaging anything, and got those guys swapped out. Alright, so now we got this alternator bracket. I'm going to pop that back on there. Just got to pull out this bolt again. Alright, so now to install our distributor, I got a reference picture of where it was lined up before. Make sure that the engine, once again, is at top dead center. Since we got that new harmonic balancer on there, we can actually see that timing mark and line it up with the 0 on there. So I know that I'm at top dead center. When this did pull out before, you might have noticed that it kind of rotated counterclockwise just because of the way the gears are cut. So we're going to kind of anticipate that rotation a little bit and try to get this to where it was set before. So be very careful. I got a little bit of assembly lube on this shaft right here. I cleaned that up. The instructions for the camshaft installation, they recommend just taking a wire brush lightly to this gear just to get any carbon deposits and stuff off of that. Alright, so that's bottomed out. Our oil pump shouldn't have turned at all, so that should mate nicely with that. I'm going to check our photo, line that up, and that looks like it's exactly where it was before, so that's perfect. And that's all the way bottomed out, so the next thing we're going to do is just put that little keeper on there, that little fork, and then we can bolt that down. Then we can plug in our cam position sensor again. Then I'm going to throw our distributor cap back on. It's a good time to change out your rotor and cap and everything like that. I didn't do this too long ago, but there still was some stuff on here. I'll have to do it another time because I also have to replace my coil. There's a big crack on top of that as well, I just noticed. I just went and cleaned it up with some Scotch-Brite and all the contacts, so now we can fit this guy back into place. Alright, so now it's time to focus up here on top again. We got our new lifters we got to drop in, as well as putting our head on. I'm going to go ahead and clean off all the gasket surfaces. I got this one pretty much as clean as I did. I just took a razor blade and scraped it, and then used a little bit of Scotch-Brite on some of the rough stuff. I have a plastic wheel on a drill that I used, and that got a bunch of that carbon buildup and everything like that. So this is pretty much clean. The only thing I'm going to do, since now we can rotate the engine freely without having to worry about timing or anything, I'm going to go and clean up the rest of these pistons. I got number 1 and 6 all clean since they're at the top, but we can do 2, 3, 4, 5 and clean up all this carbon on here as well. So I'm going to go do that and then clean up all the gasket surfaces on the head as well, on the other side of the head. And we also have the intake and exhaust gasket surface, and then also the valve cover gasket on top of the head, which is a little bit easier to clean up when it's already on the bench. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll be back to throw in the lifters and then throw in the head. Alright, so it is lifter installation time. So I got my bucket of lifters that were chilling in some oil for well over a few days now, so they should be ready to install. I got my magnet here that I'm going to use to install it. Got that all cleaned off from any debris. So now we're going to very carefully stick these into the bore. And there's one. We'll just work our way down and get these all in. Alright, so I got our head gasket surfaces cleaned one last time with some brake clean on a rag. So they are all ready to go. Now I'm just getting our head gasket. We'll slap that on there and then slap our head on. So with their head gasket, they got top stamped in right there so you know which way this goes. This is going to lock into 2 of the dowel pins on the front and back of the block. Make sure you got that 1 bolt on there. I got that the new bolt on there held in with the zip tie. There we go. That fell down into place. Make sure everything is flat. Now we got a new set of head bolts. We're just going to start feeding these guys in the correct orientation they were before. So all the big ones on the driver's side, all the little ones on the passenger side. And I am not using any oil on these bolts. It's recommended from the manufacturer of the bolts actually that you don't put any in there, because if you get oil down in the hole that it's supposed to go to, you can hydrolock that small area and actually potentially ruin your block by cracking it. So I'm going to get these all tightened up just by hand just to get the slack out, and then we're going to go and torque these down properly in a couple of rotations, I believe. This front right one right here, this I'm going to put a little bit of Teflon tape because this one actually goes down into a water jacket and I don't want any leaks, so I'm going to have some thread sealant on this guy. Alright, so now it's time to torque these head bolts in. We're going to do it in 3 different waves. We're going to start with 22 foot-pounds, then move our way up to 45, and then move it up to 110, except for this guy right here that we put sealant on. That one only gets 100 foot-pounds. So I'm going to start off with 22. We're going to start in the middle, and we're going to start working our way outwards, so that way we don't get any weird warping or anything when we torque this down. Just kind of work your way as if this was a circle, starting from the middle and work our way out. Alright, so that last bolt that's on the driver's side over here, I for some reason can't fit my torque wrench in there because of the firewall getting in the way, and even with my smaller torque wrench I can't fit that in there. I tried peeling up this little flange with a firewall but still can't get it in, so I'm just going to have to torque it by hand. Just kind of have to guess the best I can with a breaker bar to be able to do that last one. But now we got it all 22, let's go up and move to a 45 foot-pounds. And then lastly, we'll go up to 110 foot-pounds. Then this one up here only gets 100, so we'll back it down 10. Alright, so we got our new ground strap. I got that from jeepcables.com. We're going to put this back onto here with our 11/16 nut. Alright, so now we're going to install our new push rods we got right here. And when we put these in, I'm just going to put a little bit of assembly lube on either end of these, and then we're going to slip it underneath the rocker, and then we can torque down our rocker. And the torque spec on these bolts is going to be 19 foot-pounds. So you'll feel it hit the top of that lifter. You want to make sure it's nice and sturdy in there. Alright, just like that, I'm going to repeat that 5 more times to get the rest of the push rods in. Alright, so I got our gasket surfaces clean for our valve cover gaskets. We're going to slip that on, and we got alignment holes on either end. They're going to correspond with the head bolts that we put in here. Then we'll take our valve cover. I went and installed the new grommets, and then pushed our aluminum spacers inside those new grommets, so this is ready to go on here. And then we can start feeding in the bolts. in the layout pattern that it was before, so I'll just use the picture I took earlier for reference, and then we'll get these guys all snugged down. Alright, so for torquing these bolts, we're just going to snug them up. Basically, they're going to bottom out because you'll feel it gets solid because that's the aluminum spacer touching the top of the cylinder head block. But we're going to start slowly kind of torquing these down like we did the head gasket. Start in the middle and kind of work our way outwards. So I'm just going to go a little bit at a time, and then we're going to check it a couple times because you'll notice it'll start to get a little bit loose on other ones that you worked on initially. So we're going to go through this and torque them all down. Alright, once again, got our gasket surfaces all cleaned for, lastly, our intake and exhaust manifold. So we're going to slip on our new gasket and then slip on our exhaust manifold, and then we can throw on our intake. So this guy is just going to go over the studs. There's one in the back of the engine and one on the front. And then the front one that I had, the whole stud just came out, so that's fine. We can just stick that in there, but we're going to bring our exhaust manifold in against the head. Then I'm just going to tighten these guys up, but not torque them down quite yet. So with lining this up, you got to make sure it goes in the dowel pins that are in the cylinder block. You don't want to put this on crooked. Then we'll start threading in some bolts and tighten this down. Alright guys, so we got everything all put back together for the intake manifold, and that is pretty much wrapped up to where we started this video. Now obviously I still got a whole bunch of work to do on the front end still, so you guys want to stay tuned for that as I rebuild the rest of this front end of this Jeep Cherokee. And then from there we can fire up the engine and get this cam broken in. But overall, we just put an upgraded camshaft in this Jeep 4.0. I'm pretty excited to get this thing fired up. So hopefully you guys were able to follow along if you're doing this at home. Overall, it's just not too complicated of an engine. The straight six is fairly simple. It's just time consuming, taking off all the parts and making sure they're clean when you're putting stuff back together. That's the biggest thing, especially when you're breaking in a new cam. We want this to be as clean as possible so we don't have any failures during break-in. But if you guys have any questions or comments, make sure to post them below and I'll be happy to get back to you. As always, I'll post links to the parts I use in this video down below, including that comp cams I got from Summit Racing. So if you guys liked this video and found it helpful, make sure to like and subscribe to the Outjeeping YouTube channel to help keep these videos coming. And if you want to help support the channel, I got an Etsy link down below where you guys can get some Outjeeping decals. Stay tuned for the next video as we put the rest of this Jeep Cherokee back together in this front end and fire this thing up. So, I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.